And now for the last few verses of Revelation chapter 14, this is the end. And what John does after this is he just picks up the pieces. Goes to the last of the 7 judgments, and then he talks about the basically it's going to be the collapse of Satan's kingdom and the inauguration of Jesus' kingdom. The fireworks show is just about over, and now what happens is he talks about the coming of the reaping of the judgments. Revelation 14, verse 14. Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud, one like a son of man. How many times have I referred to Daniel 7? This is right out of Daniel 7. This is Jesus riding on a white cloud with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. He's coming for judgment. And another angel came out of the temple. Now, not another angel like Jesus is an angel. This is another angel, but he is coming to Jesus. Another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud. So it's an angel calling to Jesus. Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. This is not harvest is ripe for salvation. This is the harvest is ripe for judgment. By this point in Revelation, people aren't sitting around saying, oh, wow, it's time to get saved. People are banging their fists against the Lord and his kingdom. They're banging their fists against God and his Christ. They refuse to submit to Jesus. And so it's ripe for judgment. Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Another came out from the altar, the angel who has authority over the fire, and he called a loud voice to him who has a sharp sickle, put in your sickle and gather the clusters from the vines of the earth, for its grapes are ripe. So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. The winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. That's like 200 miles. So you've got this picture of 2 separate judgments here. The first one is like the sickle of a wheat harvest. The second one is like the sickle of a grape harvest. The first one cutting down and mowing down the people, and the second one just, it's like their bodies, and the second one is just the flowing of blood. They're all Old Testament images. If you just take a quick pass over with me to Joel chapter 3, and in Joel chapter 3, of course these images are going to come out of the Old Testament prophets. Here in Joel chapter 3, I'm just going to read some of it to you. I'm going to pick it up in verse 9. Proclaim this among the nations. Notice in Joel chapter 3, these are global judgments, not judgments just against Israel. Joel is bringing judgments to the world. Consecrate for war. Stir up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords, your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Man, this was thousands of years ago. The prophet Joel was foreseeing what is yet to come. The entire world raised up in war, not peace. This is not peace for our time. This is not the success of the League of Nations. This is not the success of the United Nations. This is not the success of a new world order or a global reset. It is not going to work. Hear me. Making peace throughout the world will not work without Jesus Christ. Period. I don't care how many peace treaties we think we're going to sign. You leave out the Messiah, there is no peace. Joel foresaw it. Verse 11, Joel chapter 3. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations. Gather yourselves there. Bring down your warriors, O Lord. Here comes God. Let the nations stir themselves up. Come to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Probably, don't know for sure, when the valley splits outside of Jerusalem, when Jesus comes back and the Mount of Olives splits. We'll talk about that probably at the end of Revelation. When it splits, that may be Valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all of the surrounding nations. Now verse 13 is the key. Joel chapter 3. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Notice that first of those two harvests. Put in your sickle. And then go in, tread, for the winepress is full. He's just telescoped these two last judgments together. What's really interesting is that was written in Hebrew. When the Jews translated that into Greek, called the Septuagint, in between the two testaments, they translated the word sickle there, plural. Put in your sickles, which is how John is seeing it in Revelation. Not one, but two judgments. Mow them down in the wheat judgment. Cut them down. And then cut them down in the grape judgment. That is a, why two? It is a total and complete judgment on the earth. Nobody survives that. Jesus will talk about it in Matthew 25, what's called the sheep and goat judgment. And he'll gather all the nations of the world, and he'll separate the sheep from the goats. The sheep will be those who have believed in his name and who have demonstrated that with how they have acted. The goats are all of those who thought they were going to do it on their own. All of those who thought they were given the cup of water and visiting the sick, and whose motives were not pure. And they will be cast into hell at the end of the tribulation before he inaugurates his kingdom. We will be talking about that in the future. That was Joel chapter 3. Go one more place with me, and that's going to be Isaiah. I love Isaiah. If you haven't read Isaiah recently, read Isaiah. It's not an easy book, but it is amazing. Listen to this. This is God coming in judgment. Who is it who comes from Edom? Now, when God comes from Edom, he's coming in judgment of the nations. In crimsoned garments, that's the color of blood, from Basra. He who is splendid in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I speaking in righteousness, mighty to save. That's God talking. Why is your apparel red and your garments like his who treads in the winepress? Go back to the judgments. I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. I trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath. Their lifeblood spattered my garments and stained my apparel. For the day of vengeance was in my heart, and my year of redemption has come. I looked, but there was no one to help. I was appalled, but there was no one to uphold. So my own arm brought me salvation, and my wrath upheld me. I trampled down the peoples in my anger. I made them drunk in my wrath, and I poured out their lifeblood on the earth. Listen, that's God in his unchecked anger. That's what John's talking about. By the time you get to this game over part of Revelation, chapter 14, it's over. Listen, God is furiously angry. I cannot overstate that. God is so incensed with what we have done. He's incensed with who we are, what we've become, the very fact that we draw breath on this world that he has created. To say that he is irate is understatement. We have lied, we have killed, we have stolen, we have arrogantly presumed upon him, we have worshipped other gods, and we have killed his children by the tens of millions. He's irate. And we go on our merry way telling him how he should behave as God. That's the bad news. There's only one good news. All of that anger that God possesses was taken and focused in one place on one person at one moment in time at a cross called Calvary, where Jesus hung and died, where he cried out before heaven and earth, my God, why have you forsaken me? And God laid upon his perfect Son the sin of us all. That Isaiah passage continues. I will recount the steadfast love of the Lord, the praises of the Lord. according to all the Lord has granted us and the great goodness of the house of Israel, that he has granted them according to his compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. Listen, for God so loved the world that he gave Jesus, his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. We have to run to the cross, and there's no other way. Any other way, we face the full wrath of God, and we deserve every bit of it. And not only have we done these things, we have the audacity to tell God how he should act, what righteousness is, what justice is, how he should enact justice, how he should enact world peace, what he should do to set things right through us. He's seething with anger, but the anger is poured out on his Son. This is a period of God's grace. This is a period of the Lord's favor. This is a period where we can run to his arms and find forgiveness for every sin, great and small, that separates us from the love of God. There is no other way, individually or for the world. This is a debt we cannot pay. This is a debt we'll never pay. And these are problems we will never fix. We will never bring in justice. We will never make things right. Only Jesus, only the cross. And so we're left with a question now, as we have been left with the question for centuries. What will you do with Jesus? Will you bow your knee to Jesus and say, God, forgive me, and receive the free gift? Or will you harden your heart and shake your fist and say, not your way, but my way? Will you serve the Lamb, kiss the Son? Or will you choose to face the wrath of God, which is coming? And that's what John says. With the end of this judgment, game over.